This Saturday, December 5th, the Ultimate Fighting Championship continues its finishing kick of 2020 with yet another main event rearranged due to a positive COVID-19 test, as Kevin-Holland was forced out of his headlining matchup with Jack Hermansson just 10 days before the event. However, where other cards have been harmed this year, the replacement of Holland by Marvin-Vettori, if it does not upgrade the main event, at least gives us a matchup that is just as relevant and just as interesting in different ways. However it plays out this weekend, we will be making history as 27 years and a month after the first Ultimate Fighting Championship, we finally have our first main event headliner from Italy. Good evening and welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 19, Hermansson versus Vettori, or if you prefer, UFC Vegas 16. I'm your host, Ben Duffy. With me to break down the all-European main event and the rest of the 11-fight card is Keith Shillan. Keith is the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, as well as a writer for Sherdog.com, and a host and creator of numerous shows for Sherdog Radio, including, of course, the Shillan and Duffy Show. Keith, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, brother, man. This is a pretty good card. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm actually more excited about this main event than I was for the Kevin-Holland one. Now, the Darren Till one, if I was ranking the three, I would put the Darren Till one most excited. But I'm more excited about the Marvin Vettori matchup than the Kevin-Holland one. How do you feel about it?
You literally took the conversation starter question I was going to ask you right out of my mouth. I was going to ask, without tipping your hand as to your pick for the fight, whether you were more interested in this fight than either of the two matchups that had preceded it. As a fight, I love this one. Yeah. My only nagging wish is that we had been able to see this on a full camp for both men, but nonetheless, I'm stoked for the fight. And we'll probably talk a little more about the title picture implications later, but this is still an important fight for the division in terms of title contention. And while Vettori's resume isn't quite where, say, that of Holland is, he does have one ace in the hole that nobody else in this picture has, in that he has already fought Israel Adesanya and gave him one hell of a fight.
Yeah. So the three things that really jump out to me about this main event and just basically the card in general, the three things are, one, how much of a gangster are both of these guys in the main event? First, starting with Hermansson. He gets the Darren Till fight. He gets, that gets canceled. Doesn't bicker, doesn't do anything, doesn't, hold up the main event, takes on Kevin-Holland. That gets changed, gets a new opponent, and all three guys have very different styles, and nothing changed. Then you have Marvin Vettori. He's been, calling for a big name fight, calling for a main event, getting all this stuff, and then he gets he was training for Jacare, and that was a big fight, but to take 2 extra rounds on, going from 3 to 5 on the main event, higher ranked opponent, I know he was training for, like I said, he was training for Jacare, so it's not like coming off your couch, but still pretty gangster move for him. I love that. So that's one thing that stands out to me. The second of all is the main event. We have Jack Hermansson and Marvin Vettori, that was replacing Kevin-Holland, which was replacing Darren Till. And I was thinking about the middleweight division in general and just how much of a change that division has taken in the last couple of years compared to when the top guys in the division were Luke Rockhold, Yoel Romero, Jacare. Like, all those guys for the most part are gone. There's a couple other guys, you throw in there. And we have this whole new between the champion and, Jack Hermansson's kind of new on the scene. Marvin Vettori, if Kevin-Holland can pull up an upset, like all these things, it's the face of the division is so different. But the third thing, and this is the thing that probably stands out to me most, is, as you mentioned, the continued growth of European MMA. We have an all-European main event, but just 2 countries that are not really known for their MMA scene, and that's we have Jack Hermansson representing Sweden and Norway, and then we have Marvin Vettori representing Italy. Just the continued growth of MMA in countries, which is really making it a global sport.
Completely agreed. With that, let's jump right into the preliminary card of UFC on ESPN 19. The UFC Vegas 16 prelims feature an interesting bantamweight matchup between Luis Smolka and Jose Quinonez. Smolka is 29 years old. He is now 7-7 across 2 separate stints in the UFC. He had a 5-5 run a few years back. He is 2-2 since returning to the octagon. Quinonez, the alum of the first season of Tough Latin America, is 30 years old, and he is 5-3 in the UFC. Currently, Smolka, the Hawaiian, is just a slight favorite, sitting around -130, -135. You can get Quinonez around +110. Keith, how do you like this matchup, and who do you like?
So as far as how I like the matchup, I'm not that crazy about the matchup simply because I don't trust Louis Smolka to even make weight. Now, we're recording this before the weigh-ins. I just picture somebody listening to this after the weigh-ins and just have to fast forward this whole portion because Louis Smolka didn't make weight or something crazy happened. And I don't want to say it's a 50-50 shot that happens, but it's out of every fight on this card, the one that's most likely to get canceled last minute, I would say on this one. Now, to break down their skill set, I'll start with Smolka. I feel like we kind of know what Smolka is in a skill sense at this point. I haven't seen much growth in a fighter. He throws his big looping punches. He does target the body, which we saw against Casey Kenny. He's been rocked so many times in the past. That's because he does, he's a tall, lengthy guy who has tall man's defense where he kind of stands up tall, lacks head movement. He is a submission threat, though I really think people over-exaggerate. I think he looks for submissions, and that's the center of his game. But he also puts himself in bad positions because he looks for submissions. He's a terrible wrestler. He loses positions easily. Move over to Quinonez. Quinonez has... the 4 losses in his career, when you really dig deep into it, he's lost to 4 really good guys. Sean O'Malley, Nathaniel Wood, Alejandro Perez, and Davi Ramos. All those guys are really good. Breaking down his skill set, this guy switches stances, can fight from both stances. He's a long, similar build to Smolka, long strikes. He does stay tight, uses a lot of feints to see his openings, though he does headhunt a little too much. He has that high guard defense, decent kicks, decent wrestler, controlling top game. He's not much of a submission threat. I wish he would go back to his wrestling because we haven't seen it that often recently, which might be why he's a little bit on a skid. As far as prediction, as I mentioned in the very beginning, I'm worried about Smolka, not only his making weight, but just his commitment to MMA. I mean, we knew about his, he had his drinking problem, which seemed like that was over. Hopefully it is over. But you hear about him having diet issues, not taking his diet serious. I mean, he had to be hospitalized for his last weight cut. And again, I don't know if he even makes weight for this one. This is a very winnable fight for him too. I mean, he's the small favorite for a reason. However, I just refuse to pick him just because I can't trust him. And at least I know Quinonez is taken serious. It's a close fight, but I'm going to take Quinonez to just kind of win every position. And I think I'm going to take him by unanimous decision. So that's my first upset pick of the night, I guess.
Hey, I feel everything you're putting down there. I don't feel comfortable, well, not literally betting, but, like coming out in favor of Smolka in this one. He did not look great against Casey Kenny in May, just got overwhelmed and run over pretty quickly. But Quinonez, you pointed out that he's only lost to very good fighters. The flip side of that is that the guys he's beaten are not the top crust of the UFC. I mean, his last couple of UFC wins, Carlos Watching, who is still looking for his first octagon win, Teruto Ishihara a couple years ago, who, was an amusing joke, and punchline that kind of fizzled out pretty quickly in terms of his actual fights. So while I don't have a lot of faith in Smolka, Quinonez isn't a finisher. If he's smart and uses his wrestling, because, he's a decent wrestler, he's much better than Smolka, he can just kind of grind out, 2 or 3 rounds out of 3. But I think Smolka at his best is a better fighter, and I'm going to pick him to be at least close enough to his best to eke it out here. So I'm going to be the square, and I'm going to take Smolka, the slight favorite, to break the 3-fight string of futility for Hawaiian fighters that started last weekend. So Smolka will get, the 50th state back on the map. In the UFC on ESPN 19 prelims, we have one of a couple of fights featuring alums of The Ultimate Fighter Latin America. This one is a lightweight matchup between Gabriel Benitez and Justin the Guitar Hero Jaynes. Benitez is 32 years old, 21-8 overall, 5-4 in the UFC since joining from the aforementioned Tough Latin America. Jaynes, 31 years old, 16-5 overall, 1-1 in the UFC since his debut, which was just in June of this year. Jaynes lost to Gavin Tucker back in August by a third-round rear naked choke in a fight in which he'd been beaten in really all 3 rounds. He beat Frank the Crank Camacho in just 41 seconds in his octagon debut back in June. Benitez, comfortable favorite here, sitting around minus 210. Jaynes, you can get as high as plus 175. Keith, who do you have in this one?
Well, first of all, I want to say this. I think this is a really fun fight. I think it's going to be one of the best fights on the card. So I'll start with Benitez. So Benitez, obviously, he's a Mexican fighter, so he gets that Mexican stereotype that goes back to boxing. While he does get into wars, he's not that Mexican brawler. He is very technically savvy, sound guy. Southpaw. Everyone always talks about his leg kicks, which are very good. If you remember his last fight against Omar Morales, he got one of them checked and had that huge, gross cut on his leg. However, while his kicks are so good, and it's definitely can be a big difference in this fight, I think it's his jab is his best weapon. It's just a crisp jab. He follows it up with a very accurate left hand. He likes to work the body. Nice snap on his punches. He doesn't have a lot of tell signs in his punches. Throws them straight from no wind up on it, I should say. Good movement. He loves to kick the body. Also, he always talk about his leg kicks. He got good kicks to the body. He's a good grappler, though he doesn't use it enough. He prefers to stand on the feet. Move over with Justin Jaynes. Now, Jaynes it would fit the Mexican brawler style even more. Brawler, mostly just a puncher, though. He doesn't throw a lot of kicks, kind of a little flat-footed that way. Not a lot of elbows or stepping knees or that. But he's a very aggressive, does well to slide into the pocket, unload big shots. He does like a lead uppercut. It's actually what he caught Gavin Tucker in the first round of that fight. Almost put him out. He's got good power, though he does lose a little bit of that power because a lot of his punches kind of come looping instead of tight. And he loads up, so he kind of telegraphs a lot of things. And he tires because he throws everything powerful. He does have a wrestling background, though, similar to Benitez. We don't see it much, especially offensively, though he will attack with that guillotine choke, which I think it was Gavin Tucker almost got that guillotine too. His sub-defense is a little questionable. Gavin Tucker almost submitted him in the first round, did submit him in late in the fight. As far as prediction goes, so, we say this a lot. We don't root for fighters because I more root for a storyline than I do for the actual fighter. And Justin Jaynes has his father corner him for this fight because his father has, I believe, stage 4 cancer and not expected to be on Earth much longer. So he's letting his dad kind of corner him, which is an incredible story. And you kind of you don't want to pick against that. You definitely don't want to root against it, I should say. That said, I still got to go with my brain. This is just a bad stylistic matchup for him. I think he's overmatched. I think Benitez jabs his face off. I would make it my lock of the night, but the emotional factor does scare me a little bit, that maybe Jaynes can dig down, go to a place that we didn't know about, and get the win. But I'll still take Benitez by unanimous decision. That's so. Jaynes is so tough. I think he'll make it entertaining. And I'm going to actually say this is going to be my fight. I'm going to go early. I'm going to say this is my fight of the night pick. A fight for the prelims, which usually doesn't get the fight of the night, but I think this is going to be the fight of the night.
Outstanding. I'm glad that you brought up the kind of human story and human element behind this because, we call those things intangibles, but I come from an old school enough perspective that Frank Mir was my favorite fighter when he went and fought Ian Freeman when Freeman's dad was on his literal deathbed. And I just remember, Mir getting the mouthpiece knocked out of his face by a guy who yeah, who elevated his performance because he felt he was fighting for something bigger than just the purse. It's not meaningless. But
don't forget Michael Chiesa on the Ultimate Fighter show.
yes.
He wasn't one of the favorites.
No, he wasn't one of the favorites. And yeah, I mean, like left in the first or second episode to go see his father, and father said, go back, win this thing, basically. And damned if he didn't. So yeah, I mean, we're talking about anecdotal things here. We're not going to be able to show you any charts or data that say that, hey, fighters who have a mortally ill immediate family member perform better at this percentage rate, but I never completely discount it. Having said that, I'm with you. I think Benitez is a rough style matchup for Jaynes here. I keep flashing back to Jaynes's fight with Gavin Tucker just because it was just a couple months ago. And I see a bunch of things there that Tucker did effectively against Jaynes, and they just check all the boxes. They're all things that Benitez can and does do. So give me Benitez in a lopsided decision that will leave nobody feeling great about it, probably even Benitez.
Yeah, just to jump back in here, sorry to interrupt you. If you like technical analysis, you like watching a really technical but like high action pace fight, check out Benitez's last fight against Omar Morales. That thing was a war, and it's not one of these slop fests. It's a good technical fight for 15 minutes. It's a really fun fight to watch.
The UFC Vegas 16 prelims soldier on with an interesting clash at featherweight between Damon the Leech Jackson and Spanish prospect Ilia Topuria. Topuria is 9-0. He is another product of the same Brave CF that gave us Khamzat Chimaev, among others, and has really just sort of sprung onto the map this year as a major pipeline of talent to the UFC. He put on a dominant performance over Youssef Zalal, another highly touted prospect, back in October at UFC Fight Night 179. He'll be taking on Jackson. The 32-year-old Texan is 18-3-1 with one no contest. And in his UFC career so far, he has perhaps the unprecedented, he has the royal flush. He has one win, one loss, one draw, and one no contest under the UFC banner so far. He went 0-1-1 with a no contest in his first run in the octagon back in 2015, went back to the regionals and wrecked shop in Legacy Fighting Alliance for a couple of years, had a brief and unfortunate run in Professional Fighters League that lasted all of 10 seconds as he ran right into a Jorge Masvidal on Ben Askren type knee strike against Moved Khaybulaev. He came back to the UFC on short notice on September 19th as a firm underdog against Mirsad Bektic, got the worst of it for 2 rounds before pulling out a fantastic come-from-behind guillotine choke for the finish. Thus, his UFC adventure continues. He is a pretty stiff underdog against Topuria. Jackson available around plus 200. Topuria as high as minus 245. I love this fight. This is an old-school grappling extravaganza that a lot of times when you get one of those, what you end up with is a mediocre kickboxing match. But I have the feeling we are going to see a fun fight on the ground here. And I say an old school grappling extravaganza. Damon Jackson is an old school grappling specialist. You know, it like seeing him fight, it almost feels like a bit of a throwback. His takedowns are serviceable. Well, they were more than serviceable at the LFA level. At the UFC level, they're serviceable. In PFL, they get him knocked out in 10 seconds. Sorry, Damon. But his thing is what he showed you against Mirsad Bektic. He was losing against the bigger, stronger guy, the better wrestler, but Bektic just kept flirting with the danger zone. I mean, he almost shot into that same guillotine what feels like a half dozen times during that fight until Jackson got it. Jackson, there's something of the 90s Gracie in action video about the guy, because his thing is to survive until you get yourself into a situation where he can finish the fight. He's taking on Topuria, who is a dazzling prospect. I thought he handled Youssef Zalal, and Zalal was one of the UFC's shiniest new things about 6 months ago. I think in this fight we're going to get just a lot of wrestling and a lot of grappling. Topuria is a huge, strong-looking featherweight, and it seemed to play out that way against Zalal, who's more of the lightning quick type guy. I thought Topuria just kind of muscled him. I expect him to be ahead of the game most of the fight here against Jackson. Neither of them is a fantastic striker, but Jackson, I think, is especially rudimentary. So I expect Topuria to get the better of the kickboxing exchanges on the feet. If Jackson decides he wants it on the ground, I don't think he can force it, but I think Topuria will let it happen. I'm picturing Jackson probably shooting for a takedown, mid first to early second round when he doesn't like what he's getting on the feet, and Topuria just, either pancaking it, spinning around to the back, and we have a scramble, or if Jackson gets in deep enough, maybe Topuria tries to, jump guard with a guillotine or something, and we're going to have a lot of fun on the ground. I have Topuria by submission in this one. While I think he's probably a better fighter, better athlete, closer to his prime than Jackson, I don't see him finishing Jackson. And I also don't see Jackson being able to spring something on him like he did on Mirsad Bektic. So give me Topuria by decision in a really fun fight that has just lots of interesting positional scrambles, probably has both guys in danger from time to time on the ground. But yeah, Topuria by decision.
So, yeah, I think you might have hit this right on the head. This is going to be a fun fight. Start with Damon Jackson. I didn't know he had that royal flush thing. That's absolutely fantastic. Nice find on that. Damon Jackson, really big featherweight. That's the first thing I always think of, how long, lengthy he is. He fights at a really high pace, does well to keep his, on the feet. He's known for his grappling, but on the feet he does well to keep his opponent at the end of his punches. Strong kicking game, though he often can throw them, naked kicks will catch him countered. He also keeps his chin high in the air. He is a former NCAA wrestler. He will shoot for a takedown if you tag him up on the feet a little bit, or if you're over pressuring, then he can drop down. Even though he comes from an NCAA wrestling background, he gets taken down fairly easily, and that's because, as they pointed out in his fight against Bektic, is that he's so confident beyond his back. He also willing to jump on the guillotine like he kept trying to do to Bektic, even though his coach, Saif Sayoud at 47A, was kept telling him to abandon that. He's stubborn with that. But he has got a really slick submission game. He submitted Bektic in the third round, but he had him in trouble multiple times. Like, he didn't just catch him. Like, he continued. Like, he eventually ended it, but he was a threat the entire fight. And he's not a guy who needs to be on top to get submission. He can get him off his back. And also, he doesn't get enough credit for his cardio, because he took that fight on 3 days' notice, and it was a grinding, grueling fight. And one of the big reasons is he made Bektic work. So his cardio should get just as much credit as his submission game. Now, Topuria, I think you're absolutely right about being a great prospect. This guy's only 23, and he just recently joined MMA Masters, which is another thing I like, because that's a solid team. It's always been a strong team, but it seems like they've been really pumping out some really good guys lately. He's a classic wrestle boxer type. Nice power, throws a lot of tight, hard hooks. He loves his overhand right. Very, very good wrestler. Has a Greco-Roman background. And we saw him suplex Youssef Zalal in their fight, like the first attempt for a takedown. Great, great hip control and the scrambles. He is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And what I liked is that he was constantly working for positions, not just, hold you down. And he is a submission threat. He is aggressive looking for submissions, like almost overly aggressive. He loves the head attacks. Like, you go back to the, I keep bringing up the Zalal fight because that's the most recent one. But I think there was a Darce choke in there. There was an Anaconda choke in there. He had that guillotine that Jack Hermansson does. Like, you're out on the side and then you you jump back out and you kind of weird, like almost like high on the elbow guillotine that Hermansson does. Topuria kept going for that too. Cardio might be an issue though, because he did slow down against Yusuf Salah. And we just talked about Damon Jackson's cardio. That I think is Damon Jackson's best avenue for victory. That said, I'm also taking Topuria. I think the fight is going to look very similar to the Bektic fight. Like I expect Topuria to take him down. The only difference is I don't think he's going to get caught like Bektic did. So I'm going to take Topuria. I'm going to take him by unanimous decision.
On the UFC Vegas 16 prelims, we have a flyweight attraction between one completely new face and one pretty new face in the division. We have Jimmy Flick versus Cody Durden. Flick is 30 years old. He is 15-5 overall and will be making his UFC debut after a successful appearance on Dana White's Contender Series back in September. He choked out Nate Smith in the third round of that fight. He'll be taking on Durden. Durden, the 29-year-old, is 11-2 overall. He is 0-0 with one draw in his UFC career. He fought Chris Gutierrez on August 1st and ended up with a draw there just through having thrashed him to a 10-8 first round and then lost the second and third. So a righteous draw there. Flick, the slight favorite, minus 165. Durden available around plus 145 or 150. How do you feel about the debuting Contender Series alum Flick and the fight?
Yeah, I always have a special place in my heart for the Contender Series guys. If people don't know, I do all the Contender Series previews on SureDog. So I'm very familiar with tape study of Flick. I'll start with Durden, though. Durden, I'll start with him just because he's been in the UFC, got that draw against Chris Gutierrez, who's he's a quality fighter in the UFC. Durden's a guy from Georgia. He trains with the American Top Team Atlanta, which is a kind of a newer team with the Lima brothers and Tony Martin kind of running the show. I don't know if they're running the show, but you see those guys a lot in the corner. That's a growing team, and they seem to be really gelling pretty well. He's a high-paced fighter on the feet. I haven't seen much I like in the boxing from him. I think his hands are a little limited, but he throws hard leg kicks. And what I like even more, he checks leg kicks, which is something like I seem to always say the opposite. Like this guy needs to learn how to check leg kicks. Durden does. He's a solid wrestler. He was a 2-time Georgia high school wrestling state champion, so you got to like that. Nice back takes in the fight against Gutierrez in his UFC debut. He got his back immediately. Almost got a submission, got a 10-8 round, looked really good. Good ground and pound when he's on top. I am a little worried about his sub defense though, because he was almost submitted by an armbar by Gutierrez in that first fight. Move on to Jimmy Flick. He's making his UFC debut. He's battle tested though. He's fought some really good guys in his way to get to the UFC, including on the Contender Series. He's not a great athlete, especially when you see him. He's not the most physically imposing guy, but he has a very unorthodox stand-up style, which I actually kind of like. Similar to Durden in the stand-up, in the sense that I don't really see too much in the hands. That the hands need some growth. Defensively, he kind of just covers up instead of using head movement, but throws a lot of kicks and also checks kicks, which is surprising. He's an okay wrestler, decent entries, though he can kind of often shoot too far away. He will grind you against the fence. He's willing just to close this and grind against the fence and try to get some trip takedowns. But if he gets the fight to the ground, he is a legit submission threat. And he's not only is he a submission threat, he's a fun guy to watch. He's constantly moving, great in scrambles, can get submissions in scrambles. He loves the Von Flue choke. You go back to the Contender Series fight against a guy like Nate Smith. Nate Smith was a guy who's, world-class wrestler, and Flick found a way to get the fight to the ground and ran a gauntlet of submissions on this guy until he finally got him. He will play BJJ if he's on the back, which you know what I mean when I say that. He'll look for submissions instead of trying to get back up, which I don't like, but he's one of the few guys that it really works well for him. If this fight stays on the feet, which I really hope it doesn't, it'll be a really ugly stand-up battle. But if it hits the ground, which I know Flick will want to get to the ground, I think Durden might get it to the ground, though I don't think he should. But he might do it just out of habit. That's such a big part of his game. But if it should, I really think Flick is so slick Didn't mean to rhyme there, but he's so slick on the mat. I think he just keeps running subs on Durden like he did to Smith until he eventually finds one, and I'll take Flick by second round submission.
Excellent. You're too kind when you say that Flick is not imposing physically. What Keith means is that Flick is puny. I don't know why his nickname is the Brick. It should be the Rebar, but again, we're talking about flyweight here. And meanwhile, the thing about Durden, his fight against Gutierrez, even at bantamweight, which was not his preferred weight class, but he stepped in on short notice. He looked pretty stout. I expect this to be pretty glaring just in terms of how the guys look on the scale at the face-offs and then when they get in the cage together. I feel a lot of what you're putting down here. Flick's submission offense is kind of breathtaking to behold. He very diverse and varied attack. The pace you would expect from a flyweight. Extremely fun to watch. I do keep coming back to Durden's draw against Gutierrez. You're right in that Gutierrez had him in some trouble on the ground. I guess I expect in this fight that Flick will get the better of the going on the feet. Durden will go for a takedown, and Flick will, then it's his world. And I just picture Flick chaining about 15 different submission attempts on Durden before he gets the one that works. So also give me Jimmy Flick to win his UFC debut by second round submission. The UFC on ESPN 19 prelims soldier on with what I'm pretty sure must be the greatest disparity in UFC experience between any two fighters in any fight on the bill, as handsome Matt Wiman takes on the debuting Jordan Leavitt. Wiman, 37 years old, is 16-9 in his overall career, 10-7 in the UFC, where Leavitt, 25 years old, is 7-0, and he is making his UFC debut after an arm triangle submission of Jose Flores on the first week of the Contender Series this summer. Leavitt, a comfortable favorite here, minus 390. Leavitt available around plus 325. I will just say that when Wiman decided to come back from a self-imposed 4-year hiatus last summer, it was surprising to me. I never expected to see him in the octagon again. But 2 fights into that comeback, 2 losses into that comeback, I don't get what this is for, honestly. I guess that's the best way I can put it. More power to Wiman for coming back, picking up a couple paychecks, getting back into the public eye. But to me, he's not even been competitive in either of them. He lost to Luis Pena last summer, just kind of had nothing to offer him. And same for his loss to Joe Selecki last December. And now it's another whole year later. He's back once again. Answer me this, and then feel free to transition into your pick for the fight. But Keith, what is this even all about? What is Matt Wiman doing?
It's so funny because you asked me that question, and in my notes, I write, why is he still fighting? I don't get him. He's 37, so he's not in his 40s, so we'll give him that, but he looks like he's in his 50s. He has not aged well. As you mentioned, he was gone from 4 years. His last win was 2014. That was his last win. And then you mentioned his 2 fights were against Luis Pena and Joe Selecki. I don't think he got a single moment of offense in either one of those fights. And I just asked, why is he getting a 3rd shot? Why hasn't he been, forced to retire? And besides the matchmakers, besides the UFC give a shot, who's the corner man? Who's, the people supporting him? Who's saying, the only, other than he really desperately needs money, which I hope that's not the case. I hope it's more of a competitive, a delusional thing, where, these guys, you always guys who hang on too long and they don't realize they're the last ones to see that they're done. Because if he's really that desperate for money, that'd be sad. As far as skill set, on the feet, this guy is slow. He was squaring up, flat-footed, and so hittable. I'm going back to the Selecki fight. I don't think he landed a punch in that fight. He has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Luis Pena and Joe Selecki both made him look like a white belt. Like their first day, like he had no offense. His takedown defense was non-existent, and he could not get off the bottom. The most competitive thing he did in the Selecki fight was at the very end of the match. It was really weird. At the very end of the match, Selecki let go of him, and he started mouthing off to Selecki after just getting his butt kicked for 15 minutes. It made no sense. As far as Leavitt, now the Contender Series guy, he's a big dude for the weight class, which is weird because he used to fight a weight class below that. His stand-up is atrocious. This guy is so uncomfortable on the feet. He's so stiff. His chin is high in the air. He changes. I said it on the Contender Series breakdown. I'm going to say it again. He constantly changes stances, but not in a skilled striker sense. I think it's because he's uncomfortable in both stances that he just can't figure out where he want to be. I watched one fight where he legit just butt scooted. Like anytime he had a fight on the feet, he sat on his back and chased the opponent around from the butt. It wasn't like a Fabricio Verdum like got knocked down and like come down to my guard. It was he like, I don't want to stand up. I'm just gonna chase you from the butt scoot. His first 4 fights I watched, he did not land a strike in his first 4 fights of his career. He only has, I think, 7 fights in his career, so that's bad. That said, flip it on the other side, on the ground, there's a reason why he was butt scooting around, because he is a legit submission. I know I said that a couple of times, but he is a serious submission threat. He will shoot immediately for a takedown. Not great entries, more of a funk style where he'll try to close distance, kind of keep his hips moving until he gets position. He'll Imanari roll, he'll pull guard, he'll jump on heel hooks, anything possible to get the foot to the ground. But what he does, slick back takes. He's very flexible. He's kind of creative. He'll go for submissions from any position. Darce chokes and scrambles. He had this crazy slick Kimura when he was an amateur. Got a crucifix in one fight, crucifix submission. He's willing to give a position and be compromised while looking for the sub. Well, that'll get him beat up a little bit. It's definitely fun to watch. Cardio is an issue, though, because there was one fight that he was dominating the whole time and then gassed out. Still got the submission. So who wins? This is Wiman's best chance of winning, simply because of how one-dimensional Leavitt is, and it's also the one fight that he'll take the least amount of damage. That said, I still think Leavitt finds a submission in a scramble. I just think Matt Wiman is done. So give me Leavitt. I'm going to say he does it in the first round. Leavitt, which is funny that I'm saying it's his best chance of submission winning, because I believe Pena and Selecki went to a decision. And I'm saying first round submission, but I still think it's his best chance of winning, because that's how low I am on Wiman right now.
Yeah. For the record, Pena did finish him in the 3rd round. Just finally punched him out on the ground. Yeah,
sorry.
But
I apologize.
You can be forgiven for forgetting how that fight ended, because it just felt like 15 rounds of Pena just kind of keeping Wiman on the defensive on the ground until he finally punched him out. I'm with you on everything you put down here, and you pointed out what I didn't really articulate it. The reason why I'm asking what Wiman is even doing, it's not that he's lost both fights. It's that he's offered no threat. He's not had either of these guys in any trouble at any point. The best you can say about him is that he has survived with 2 pretty good prospects in the UFC. Like, he's proven that a guy 36, 37 years old can navigate these waters without drowning, and that's about it. Leavitt is a guy that prime Wiman probably would have handled. Like, Wiman in his prime, he was never a top 15 lightweight, but he was a solid dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as your question of, who is in this guy's corner, like who is telling him to keep doing this, you have to keep in mind that at least when he came back, he was with Scrap Pack. So he had a guy in his corner in Gilbert Melendez who had to be told to leave the UFC on 5 straight losses. He's not in the camp that's not going to tell you, hey, keep at it. I think this fight is going to be dreadful. If there's an anti-fight of the night pick, this is it. Because I see Leavitt winning every minute of this fight. But Leavitt's best avenues to a finish, at least, are the last things that Wiman kind of has going for him. Wiman, as you pointed out, he is a black belt. He was a good wrestler at one point. The last thing I think to go is your ability to survive and take care of yourself on the ground. Pena stopped Wiman, but Pena is a mean dude who's not above like beating you with his fists and elbows if he gets too frustrated trying to take your back and sink those hooks in. I haven't seen that from Leavitt. So give me Leavitt by decision, just sweeping all 3 rounds. Maybe there's a 10-8 in there just because he ends up on Wyman's back 30 seconds into a round and just stays there for the whole round. It's going to be depressing. It's not going to be fun to watch, but this is my lock of the night for sure. Leavitt over Wiman. All right. That brings us to the sole heavyweight attraction on the UFC's Vegas 16 card in what I'm going to call the bad Tinder date of fights between 2 men who have put on between 50 and 75 pounds over the course of their UFC careers in Gian Villante, the former light heavyweight, and Jake Collier, the former middleweight. Villante is 35 years old. He is 17-12 in his UFC or in his overall MMA career. He is 7-9 in his UFC career. He'll be taking on Collier, 32 years old, 11-5 overall, 3-4 in the octagon. Collier, a slight underdog, sitting around plus 170. Villante, you can get around minus 205. Keith, what is your prediction for this fight?
God. This fight is so bad. It is so weird that in a weird way, it's almost good. I just imagine the matchmakers, like, they got to be laughing with this matchup. Like, I feel like they just kind of like, let's put the 2 worst heavyweights against each other. If these 2 guys fought at light heavyweight, which they both spent time at, this would still be the worst fight on the card. You put it at heavyweight, it makes it 100 times worse. So Gian Villante is a 2-1 favorite. Like, Gian Villante should not be a 2-1 favorite against anybody in anything. I'm kind of having a hard time thinking about this fight. I'll start with Villante. He still has some power. I mean, he dropped Maurice Smith with Maurice Green. Sorry, not Maurice Smith. Maurice Green. Well, I would be more interested in Mo Smith coming back than Jake Collier. But
I think Mo Smith kicks the man's legs off.
Yeah.
Give me 56-year-old Maurice Smith.
So he still has some power. He was doing well, like kicking the legs of Maurice Green. That said, he gassed out in the saddest way possible. Like, if we made jokes about fat heavyweight submissions, like this didn't even seem real. That's because he's carrying probably 30, 35 pounds more than he should. But Jake Collier is carrying like 60 pounds more than he should. The guy's a former middleweight that weighed in at 264 for his last fight. He almost missed weight. This guy is so slow. He was a decent wrestler. Like, I was a decent wrestler back in my day, but you put a 60-pound vest on me, like, I'm not going to be that good of a wrestler anymore. This fight is terrible. So I almost picked Villante by decision, just as like the ultimate torture watching these guys for 15 minutes. But I think that would go close to Kimbo Slice Data 5000 level if they went deep. So I'll say Villante knocks him out. I'll say first round.
Excellent. This is a fight, between 2 guys that I don't have a whole lot of faith in. Obviously, we're both kind of chuckling about this, but Villante used to be a good fighter. I mean, somewhere in there, underneath, the padding, there is the guy that knocked out Corey Anderson, that beat Sean O'Connell. There's the guy that, handed Saparbek Saparov his first career loss. The guy is in there somewhere, and he's only 35. Like, I don't think Villante is totally washed. He had a tough time against Maurice Green, but Maurice Green isn't a bad fighter. Maurice Green isn't a top 15 heavyweight, but he's a top 25 heavyweight. I've seen nothing from Collier to make me think he even belongs in the UFC. I've seen nothing. He came back after 3 years, 70 pounds heavier, and got knocked out in 45 seconds. I have no reason to believe Collier is going to have anything for Villante. Give me Villante by second round finish. If gun to my head, it's a knockout. He pummels him out on the ground, but he could just get a mercy kill, big man submission. Get like an arm triangle choke or a scarf hold, can opener. Just so we could go 90s like big man submission.
I hope it's a can opener. That'd be fantastic.
They should just make it 90s rules for this. Just give me a chin and eye submission, or
headbutts 90s on the ground. Rules would be great if they both walked out with shirts on. Like a cut, the cut off arms.
And hey, I say this as somebody myself who is, probably 50 pounds heavier than his glory days. But yeah, I think it'd be fine, period, if they came out with shirts on, regardless of the rule set. But give me Villante by second round finish.
Yeah, one of them has just make it one of them should wear a rash guard, and Villante should just wear a jersey.
An Islanders jersey or something. Yeah. That would be amazing. We now move over to what is at least currently scheduled as the beginning of the 5-fight main card of UFC on ESPN 19. A high-stakes prospect fight in the featherweight division as Nate Landwehr takes on the undefeated Movsar Evloev. Landwehr, 32 years old, 14-3 overall, 1-1 in the UFC. He lost his promotional debut to Herbert Burns back in January, then came back with a nice win over Darren Elkins at UFC on ESPN 8 in May. Evloev, as before stated, undefeated. The 26-year-old Russian is 13-0 overall, 3-0 since jumping over to the UFC. He has beaten Sungwoo Choi, Enrique Barzola, and most recently, this July, Mike Grundy. Evloev, the prohibitive favorite, minus 550, where you can get Landwehr on the comeback around plus 420 or plus 430. How do you feel about this one, Keith?
All right, so I'll start with Evloev. This guy's really good. I'm really high on this guy. The scary thing is he's only 26, so he might not even be in his prime yet, and I already think this guy he looks like a top 15 guy to me for sure. He's so well-rounded, technically sound on both the feet and the ground. Fights at a high pace, high output. He's got some quick hands, some real snap on his punches. He's got beautiful, beautiful jab. He really hurts with it. Can I do this? Can I do this for a second? Can I kind of pause the topic and just rant for 1 second? As
long as you don't start rattling off the featherweight top 15 and asking me if I think Evloev can beat each of them.
I'm not. I want to talk about the jab because I just was talking about how good his jab is, and it's like a theme. I'm saying that a lot about guys, whether it be the SureDog forums or Twitter or Facebook or wherever you talk MMA. One of the questions I always see is what's a underutilized technique? And it's so trendy to say jab. It is not an underutilized technique anymore in MMA. It's actually a very utilized tool in MMA. And let's move on. A step in knee, that's underutilized. The jab, all the top fighters have a good jab. Or I shouldn't say all the top fighters, but so many top fighters have a good jab at this point. So stop saying it. Anyways, back to Evloev. I don't remember where I was. But another thing besides the jab is his head movement. Not only does he slide by punches, he slides by and keeps himself in range to counterattack. He's got a really sneaky high kick. He does some spinning attacks. He's a very, very good wrestler, has great timing on his reactionary double. He shoots when his opponents start to open up on strikes, which I love. His top game isn't great, though. He doesn't keep guys down, though he is a submission threat if the opening's there. He also was taken down in his past 2 UFC fights. Enrique Barzola took him down. Mike Grundy took him down a couple times. But go back to those fights, he had incredible scrambles. Some of the craziest, just slickest displays of agility to get back to his feet. Almost impossible to keep him down. Now move over to Nate Landwehr. This guy's fun, man. He's like a Diego Sanchez crazy man way. He's high output, insane toughness, insane cardio, just throws caution to the wind, constantly moving forward. No defense at all. Like, I don't think he knows you can block a punch. Also kind of throws a jab a lot. Though he does square up too much. They actually talked about that on what was it, his last fight was the Darren Elkins fight. He kind of was squaring up a lot. Drops his hands. Does calf kick. That's another thing he likes to do. He's pretty solid in the clinch. He's not much of a wrestler though. He was been taken down several times, but he also has a pretty good get up game. He's got a good sub defense. All right, so as far as the prediction goes, I'm going Evloev. You could probably tell by the way I was speaking on him. I'm so high on this guy. He should really piece up Landwehr. Plus, if he wants, he can take him down at will. The only way I see Landwehr getting his hand raised is his insane pace and gas tank. If he just, survives onslaughts from Evloev and Evloev gasses himself trying to finish him. But I highly doubt that. So not only am I taking Evloev, I'm taking him by second round TKO. And this is also my lock of the night. I know it's not that bold, picking the biggest favorite on the card to be my lock. I'm so high on Evloev.
I have Evloev in this one big time as well. I keep going back to Evloev's fight against Grundy, where he was taking on a guy that looked a full weight class bigger than him, a credentialed wrestler, a former British national team wrestler who had competed in the Olympics, had won a medal at the Commonwealth Games. And you mentioned that it was a clinic in scrambles. I'm looking back at my notes from that fight, and the note I left for myself was, this looks like somebody trying to give a cat a bath. Grundy was able to get the takedowns, but Evloev scrambles. It was seriously just like a cat, getting out of a bathtub. It was frustrating to Grundy. You could tell it was exhausting to Grundy. And you could tell that as well because he had a harder and harder time getting the takedown as the fight wore on, whereas Evloev stayed fresh and really started to pull ahead as a boxer in the later rounds. I like Evloev in this one big time. I don't know if I like him to finish Landwehr. Just Landwehr's been a really tough guy. He has a good gas tank. While I wouldn't be surprised to see that second round finish like you're predicting, or even a third round finish as Landwehr continues to fade and Evloev stays fresh, I'm going to go ahead and call this one a decision by Evloev in which he wins every round and just generally frustrates Landwehr. But we are not frustrated, but entertained. The UFC Vegas 16 main card powers on with a light heavyweight matchup between Roman Dolidze and the Brazilian Gian Allan. Dolidze, 32 years old, is 7-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He is 1-0 in the UFC, having made his successful promotional debut in July, knocking out Kadis Ibragimov in the first round. Allan is officially 0-0 with one no contest since joining the UFC from the Contender Series. He beat Mike Rodriguez, but that was overturned for PEDs. So, again, officially 0-0, but in our memories, we do remember him beating the guy. Right now, Dolidze is the favorite, sitting around minus 165 or minus 170, around plus 145, plus 150. I'll say when Dolidze made his debut back in July, I did not pick him. Even though I don't think that highly of Kadis Ibragimov, my thought was just, okay, this is a 32-year-old guy who hasn't fought in like 2 years. He's only fought 6 times, period. And he is built like an absolute brick shithouse. There was not that much tape available on him. And what I saw was a huge, strong, athletic guy who had a bunch of kind of disjointed techniques. He had a bunch of different weapons, but nothing really coherent. And my thought was just looking like he does, being as relatively inexperienced as he is, and having been off for 2 years, this guy might come out like a house on fire, but he's just going to gas out in no time at all. And Ibragimov will have him late. Turns out I was wrong. He came out pretty well controlled and just completely iced Ibragimov with a head kick. They kind of spent a little time staring at each other, and then Dolidze just exploded and knocked the dude out. I'm not going to say I'm suddenly a believer in the guy, but John Allan just isn't that good. And he did beat Rodriguez. It was a good performance, but now we know he popped. We don't know what he's going to look like or how he's going to perform this time out. So give me the slightly more known quantity. And neither of these guys likes to go decision to decision very much. So give me Dolidze again by first round knockout.
So Dolidze is undefeated, which is the only reason I believe that this fight is on the main card, because there's better fights on the prelims. The Flick fight is better. The Flick Durden fight, the Jackson Topuria fight, like both those fights are better. I think they should be on the main card instead of this one. But I understand that always gets people more excited. I'll start with him. I think you had a pretty good breakdown of him. He's not as good as his record suggests. Well, I'll say some positive things about him. I like that he trash talks while he fights. That makes it a little fun. He is well-rounded in the sense he doesn't have a major hole in area, but I don't think he's great in either area. He does stay tight with his punches are tight, but he kind of flexes a lot, which I think will burn him out, especially as he faces higher competition. I do like that he uses a lot of feints. He will switch stances, but he's probably better off in the orthodox stance. He's kind of slow because he's not that fluid of a guy. And he also throws one strike at a time, kind of looking for the perfect punch. And he loves his overhand right to the point where it was a good punch, but it kind of turns that Dan Henderson thing where it's a good punch, but you might go to the well too much. Though I think his check left hook is a little underrated and lands pretty well. And like you mentioned, he is absolutely ripped up. He's got good natural power, but he loads up on everything and kind of telegraphs some things. I like his high kick because, as you mentioned, he's pretty athletic. All that said, I think he's actually better on the ground than he is on the feet. He's a pretty solid wrestler. He's a legit submission threat. He's got a lot of submissions on his record, but from the tape I've seen of him recently, he has really gotten away from his ground game and suddenly wants to be a boxer. Move over to Allan. I think your breakdown was great of him. The other thing that stands out to me about Allan is he's undersized. He's probably could be a middleweight. Like I think he weighed like 202 or 203 for his fight against Mike Jackson, who is like a massive light heavyweight. You definitely don't want to be undersized. Southpaw, he's got good output, so I really like that. Kind of marches down his opponent, but he's a bit of a brawler on the feet, throws bombs, decent power, which to me is kind of just how it is when you get to those heavier weight classes. Like anybody connects, can put you out. Also, very similar to his opponent, he's right-hand happy. He just throws the same right hand over and over. He also loads up on everything. Defensively, the biggest flaw I see is that he backs straight up on the center line. Really doesn't have that much defense at all. He's very hittable, like Mike Rodriguez had some success with him. He's also willing to eat a punch to land a punch, which is obviously pleasing for the fans, but doesn't have the best track record going forward for longevity in someone's career. Not a bad clinch game. Like he likes to get to the clinch. He looks for body lock takedowns. He did that to Rodriguez a lot. Or he's willing to just press you against the cage and then just drop down on the hips. Pretty good grappler. He loves that guillotine choke. Has some submissions off his back, but he really struggles to get back up if he's taken down. Like I said, I'm not that high on either guy, even despite Dolidze's record. But I am going to take him just because I think he has probably a bigger advantage on the feet. And he's also naturally bigger guy and stronger guy. So I'll take Dolidze. And as you said, I'm not that high in Allan, so I think he will finish the fight. So I'll take him second round knockout. But because of that, he'll now be 8-0. He'll have 2 wins in the UFC. I think his next opponent, depending, how long it'll go crazy, he'll probably be a big favorite. And I wouldn't be surprised if I fade him in the next fight because I'm not that high on him.
Outstanding. All I'll point out is you mentioned that on the feet, the lead spends a lot of time kind of flexing and clenching. I mean, if I looked like that, I'd probably spend most of my day flexing too. Like not even fighting. I just go to the grocery store, it's good,
Yeah, if you got big arms though, like I know you're making a joke there, but if you have big arms, I was. It's funny you said that because I thought like, is he flexing or is he just guy with big arms? So it kind of looks like it. So it looks like he's burning energy. So that actually might not be the case. I might be seeing something that's not there.
No, I think he might be more tense just kind of through the arms and shoulders than maybe he strictly speaking has to be. Kind of the Marvin Eastman thing where, yeah, he was incredibly jacked, but he was flexing. Like he was just spending way too much energy just bouncing around there and fainting,
Yeah, I forgot what it's called in boxing. They actually have a call for it when you're like your hands are tense. I don't know. Someone who follows boxing really good, reach out to me and hit me up on Twitter and tell me because it's good about me.
We now move over to the women's flyweight division where Montana De La Rosa and Taila Santos will square off. Santos, the 27-year-old Brazilian, is 16-1 as a professional mixed martial artist. She is 1-1 in the UFC. She lost her debut last February to Mara Romero Barella, came back this past July, and beats Molly McCann at UFC on ESPN 13. De La Rosa, the 25-year-old, is 11-6 in her professional career, 4-2 in the UFC. She lost in September to Viviane Araújo. She defeated Barella before that back in February. Her last appearance before that was a loss to Andrea Lee last June. Santos, a comfortable favorite, sitting around minus 210 right now. De La Rosa around plus 170 or plus 175. Keith, who do you like in this one?
Well, first of all, I like the matchmakers in this one because I think this is a really tough matchup to take, and I really like that. Like, I don't really know where to go. This might be the fight that I had the hardest time picking as I flip back and forth. So I'll start with De La Rosa. We've seen a lot more of her. The thing that jumps out to me, I have to remind myself, she's only 25 years old, which is really surprising because she's got some really good experience, and her losses are just good girls. Like these are the girls, the list of girls that she's lost to: Viviane Araújo, Andrea Lee, Nico Montana, Cynthia Calveo, and Mackenzie Dern. Like those are 5 losses on her record, and all 5 girls are very good. So she's known for her grappling, so I'm going to start with her striking. I think her striking is improving. She has a very awkward style, but her striking looks better and better each fight. She's a little bit of a counter striker. She has a long jab, decent pop in her overhand right. Her overhand right, it was the punch that dropped Mara Romero Barella. She throws punches straight down the pipe, though she can, in her last fight, especially against Rougeau, she can often reach or lunge too much and kind of lose a little technique that way. But I do like her head movement, which helps her in their counter striking style. Lots of kicks. Sometimes she throws them naked, which can get her hurt. She is heavy on her lead leg, which leaves her open to leg kicks, something that Rougeau had some success with. She also struggles with people who are fast, which Rougeau has. But what really jumped out to me and that I liked is that even though Rougeau was stronger, she started picking up, faster. De La Rosa started picking up her timing, and as the fight went on, De La Rosa made it a lot more competitive and was kind of building. And if it was a 5-round fight or 7-round fight, something like that, if it was longer on, like De La Rosa might actually have come back and won that fight. She is a good wrestler. She's got good entry. I don't think she's a great wrestler. So I just want to put that out there. And I was going to say something very sexist, but I'm going to pass. But she's a good wrestler, good entries. She's relentless with them, and she has those long legs that she uses to her advantage. When she gets on the hips, she likes to go to that back trip because of her long legs. She's good in scrambles, good back takes, and she's a submission threat. She has 8 submission wins on her record, so I like that. Though she can be a little wild with her submission attempts, which, she'll lose position, which has happened often. Move over to Santos. Santos is also young. She's only 27. She's had 2 fights in the UFC, and they've been night and day. She looked terrible against Mara Romero Barella, who is, I think, a lower level fighter than her next opponent, Molly McCann, who she looked fantastic against. So I'm really like torn. Like, what am I going to get with this girl? Was the first fight just UFC jitters? One of those, or or is she going to be one of these people who's wildly inconsistent? No, she's a good striker. She really marches down her opponents, has some nice snap on her punches. Also builds as the fight goes on, especially in the McCann fight. Like, she looked better in the third round than she did in the first round, and she looked good in the first round, which is impressive. I love her step in knees. It's something I already said on the broadcast. I think is underused. I think it's the best part of her game, which could be a big deal going against a wrestler. If she's throwing step in knees, is De La Rosa going to want to shoot in? Good kicks. I love the front kick to the body. Another thing that could really help her against the wrestler De La Rosa. I don't like that she moves straight back on the center line when she avoids blitzes, and she also stands up very high, and that's due to having your natural Muay Thai style. But with the Muay Thai style comes the clinch game, which she's very good at. Good knees in the clinch. She'll also drop down on the hips to get a takedown. Strong body lock takedowns. Good back takes. When she was on top against Molly McCann, she was advanced into position. She is a submission threat. She's got a couple of submissions on her record. Takedown defense, though, is an issue. She struggled on the bottom when she was taken down. She was taken down by Mauro Romero Barella, not the highest level fighter, but she did show some offense off her back, specifically her flexibility. She showed she's pretty flexible on the bottom. So prediction, I said all that to say what I said in the very beginning, is I think this is the hardest fight on the card to pick, which is really surprising me, being that Santos, as you mentioned, is a sizable favorite, and I don't think it should be. I think it should be a pick'em. If it stays on the feet, Santos is going to have a good time. But I don't know if it's gonna. I think De La Rosa has a nasty style and it's gonna bloody up. I think it's gonna be some back and forth exchanges. And if she got taken down by Mauro Romero Barella, I think Dos Santos is gonna be able to take her down. So it's gonna be very close. I'm gonna take De La Rosa. I'm gonna take it by split decision, and I get 3 underdog picks on this card. But this is my biggest one, so this is my upset special, and that's Montana De La Rosa in an upset.
Outstanding. I look at this fight and I see a fight between two women that I probably wrote off prematurely. Santos came to the UFC 15-0 out of Brazil. A lot of those fights in Aspera FC. Aspera FC, for those who might not know, is basically a vehicle for getting Astra Fight Team fighters wins. I mean, it would be the equivalent of somebody coming from Jackson Wink and they're 15-0, and you see that 11 of their fights have been at Fresquez Fight Night. That's like basically like their in-house thing. So I did not believe in Santos in her debut against Barella. I thought she'd beat Barella just because I have even less faith in Mauro Romero Barella, but wasn't surprised when she lost. And we were not yet doing these previews at the time for cable cards, but Molly McCann to beat her would have been my lock of the night, I'm sure, that night. I was like, okay, Santos has already been exposed, whereas McCann is better than her record at the top level has looked like. She's going to be all over this chick. I was wrong. Santos turned it right around, just basically a tale of two different fighters. And I've been the same with De La Rosa. For some reason, in my head, I'm like, De La Rosa's not that good. She's a bust. And then I look and I'm like, man, she's 4-2 in the UFC. But even that is a little deceptive because none of her wins has been much to write home about. I mean, Barella, Nadia Kassem, Rachel Ostovich, and Christina Marks, those are 4 of the lowest level flyweights that have even passed through the division briefly. Yet her losses, have not been as bad as they look on paper. You broke down the Araujo fight really well. And then the Andrea Lee fight, that's a fight that even just now, 18 months later, I think might go differently. The way that Montana De La Rosa has been improving from fight to fight.
I agree with that. That's a good point.
Things that she'll have going for her in this fight, I think she's going to be the bigger. She'll be the bigger woman on the tape, like just taller, longer reach, longer legs. But I think she'll be the physically stronger woman when they link it up. I don't think she's getting stronger. I mean, she physically looks the same as she has for 5 years, but she's just getting better at applying her strength on other fighters. She's still not a great technical wrestler, but I think she gets some takedowns and denies some takedowns just on the basis of her strength and athleticism that she appears to have been honing recently. I can't go for the upset special here. I don't know why. I just see her, despite everything I just said here, not being able to get the fight where she wants it. I think if she's getting the better of it on the feet, Santos will probably be able to get her to the ground, and the reverse will not be true. So give me Taila Santos, probably by unanimous decision, to continue getting things back on track after her unsuccessful UFC debut, and just another tough loss for Montana De La Rosa, someone that I have to continually remind myself is better than her record is.
And better than her husband.
Maybe that's one of the reasons I think she's terrible. It's because her husband has lost 4 straight and has another fight coming.
Well, Matt Wiman's still getting fights, so I don't hate on Mark De La Rosa getting fights.
With that, we arrive at the co-main event, a light heavyweight matchup between Ovince St. Preux and the red-hot rising prospect Jamahal Hill. St. Preux is 37 years old. The Tennessee native is 25-14 in his mixed martial arts career, 13-9 in the UFC octagon. Hill, 29 years old, is 7-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He is 1-0 with 1 no contest in the UFC. Basically, he won both of his fights. He beat Darko Stosic in his debut, then beat Klidson Abreu this May, but that was overturned after he tested positive for marijuana. So he is officially 1-0 with 1 no contest, but on paper, he is 7-0. He is 7-0 with 1 no contest overall after the Abreu fight was overturned. St. Preux, the veteran, the dangerous veteran, one-time title challenger, is an underdog as we speak. He's available around plus 140 right now. Hill, you're looking at around minus 160, minus 170. Who do you like in this one, Keith?
Well, first of all, I think it's an intriguing matchup, but it's not a matchup I saw coming from the matchmakers. Like, I did not expect Jamahal Hill to get this big step up for competition, but I'm happy he is because I am intrigued by it. So I'll start with the veteran St. Preux. I feel like we kind of, know his game for the most part. He obviously still pretty crafty veteran, though he's slowed a lot. He's pretty flat-footed at this point in his career. If I'm talking about him from a stand-up sense, 4 things jump out to me. He is a counter striker. He loves, at this point, his hands, his most dangerous weapon is still that fade back left hand, which, he got against Shogun, which he got in his last fight against Menefield. Still throws a lot of kicks, and he still has decent power. He can take a beating, and despite being outclassed and showing big signs, he has incredible heart, and he can really settle in and kind of grind his way back into a fight. I mean, the most obvious one of recent memory is that Michelle Olasejek fight where he was getting the brakes beat off of him early in that fight, and he survived, settled back in, stayed composed, showed his heart, and got back into it. But really what gets him back in is his grappling game. He's always had a sneaky takedown, and when he gets on top, he's got a good game. I mean, he does that Von Flue choke, or as they call it, the Von Preux choke. That became his specialty, and he's really good at it. Even in the Olasejek fight, he actually took Olasejek's arm and wrapped it over his head, which is really crazy. Now let's go over to Hill. Hill's the guy that he looks better and better both fights. Every fight, contender series guy. He's southpaw, long and lefty. He's definitely a poised striker, great accuracy, works behind a stiff jab, which as going back to my rant earlier, is a thing I've been saying a lot of jabs, throws straight punches down the pipe. I love that he will rip the body with strikes. He keeps his distance with teep kicks. He likes kicks to the body, step in knees. He's got a fast high kick, which being so tall he is, he can just get it up there so easily. And he has some serious defensive holes. He keeps his head on the center line. He has been rocked in the past by pulling his head straight back. But he recovered, did not lose. He keeps his chin high in there. I don't remember, it was his last fight. Trevor Whitman actually said on the broadcast that he didn't like that. He pointed out, like, this guy's a really good offensive striker, but man, he's going to get tagged. And St. Preux obviously has that power, especially if Hill gets too creative and kind of walks into that fade back left. But what I do really like is when you crash, if you try to get in close on him, he's the one that initiates the clinch, which I've always, I've said this many times. You want to be in the offensive side of the clinch. And he's not one-dimensional in an offensive wrestling sense. He will sneak in a takedown, though he doesn't set it up too well. But defensively, he's a terrible defense wrestler. Darko Stojic took him down 6 times in their matchup in a fight that Hill was dominating him, and he still got 6 takedowns against him. That said, I'll give him credit. He's hard to hold back down, and this is all the way back to, before he was on the Contender Series, amateur fights stuff. He scrambles well back to his feet, so I'll give him that. And he will throw up submissions off his back due to his long legs. And also, he was a regional champion. He's got 5-round experience. So this is a big step up in competition. I don't think I think he can go deep. I don't think he'll have like an adrenaline dump. I'm really torn on this because Hill is undefeated and he's taken a huge step up going from Klidson Abreu to a veteran like OSP. But I'm going to take him simply because I think OSP is done. I really don't like what I see him on the feet. He could get the fight to the ground, but I think he'll maybe be able to scramble back to his feet. But I just have this feeling that OSP, a guy that has been so explosive, so not the most technically savvy guy, those guys are the ones that the bottom falls off quick. And that could be the case. And I just have that gut feeling. So I'm going with the gut feeling. So I'm going to take Hill. OSP is still a really hard guy to get out of there. And he can just take a beating. And I still expect that to happen. I just think Hill's going to be so much quicker than him. And I think he's going to be able to keep on the end of his punches. So give me Hill by unanimous decision.
Awesome. I mean, you covered so much that kind of followed along what I was thinking about this fight. Honestly, if I think about Ovince St. Preux, the most disheartening thing about his last couple of years in the sport was that one-off heavyweight fight against Ben Rothwell. I mean, well, not only was it a terrible fight and he looked terrible and was not in danger of winning it at any point, but it made me question kind of his commitment to his own career. It made me question whether that cut to 205 for a big light heavyweight is getting to be too much for him. All those things make me concerned about picking the 37-year-old Ovince St. Preux here. This is a fight. Hill is on his way up. He's looked fantastic so far. I mean, certainly there are holes, there are gaps in the armor, but he appears to be improving from fight to fight. He's seems to be a student of the game as well as just a physical fighting prodigy. St. Preux obviously on his way down. It's crazy to me that he's had like over a dozen fights since the John Jones fight, because that feels to me like it must be like 5 fights ago and it's like 12 fights ago. He's on his way down. If these guys met in another year or two, I might feel differently about it. But Ovince St. Preux, even as old and diminished as he is, even as he's become increasingly one-dimensional, or his arsenal has kind of shrunken over the last few years, he really is just a minefield for someone like Hill to navigate. Hill makes mistakes on the feet that Ovince St. Preux will only have to catch him once to make him pay for it. If if this turns into a wrestling match, I do think Hill is just going to be big and explosive enough to get back to his feet. But the thing about St. Preux is all of his shoulder chokes and, like, the big trivia thing where he's the guy that's pulled off 4 Von Flue chokes in the UFC, that really is just shorthand for the fact that he is an incredibly dangerous guy in scrambles. I go back to his 3 minutes of madness against Tyson Pedro a couple years ago. There was no danger of a Von Flue choke there, but just Pedro was in the danger zone as long as those two guys were rolling around and moving from position to position. I like St. Preux to win this one. He's going to walk through some fire, and I think he's going to finish this in the first round. And it's something that we'll look back a few years from now and maybe as one of his last gasps, and maybe the loss that Hill followed up with like a 6 or 7 fight winning streak to make his way to a title shot. I'm a believer in Hill in the future. I think St. Preux is on his way out, but this is bad timing for this fight. St. Preux is going to catch Hill with something. Give me a submission in the first round, but it could just as easily be a knockout. And so we come to the main event of UFC on ESPN 19 as middleweight contender Jack the Joker Hermansson welcomes late replacement Marvin Vettori to the octagon. Hermansson, the 32-year-old Swede fighting out of Norway, is 21-5 in his mixed martial arts career. He is 8-3 in the UFC. He defeated Kelvin Gastelum back in July with a shocking heel hook in just 1 minute and 18 seconds. Before that, he was knocked out by Jared Cannonier early in the second round of their meeting. Previous to that, last April, he took a unanimous decision over Ronaldo Jacare-Souza. Marvin Vettori, the 27-year-old from northern Italy, is 15-4-1 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 5-2-1 in the UFC. Most recently, he choked out Carl Roberson back at UFC on ESPN 10 in June. First round rear naked choke. That, of course, was a fight that was postponed due to Roberson having weight cut issues earlier in the year, sparking off a memorable rampage through a hotel lobby by Vettori. And that tells you a lot of what you need to know about the man and his temperament. Before that, he defeated Andrew Sanchez and Cesar Ferreira. And that 3-fight win streak, of course, follows up his grinding split decision loss to current middleweight champ Israel Adesanya back in April of 2018. Vettori, despite being the lower ranked fighter and the late replacement, is a bit of a favorite over Hermansson right now. Vettori sitting around -135 or -140. Hermansson available as high as +120. I'll go first. I understand why Vettori is a slight favorite here. He's a physical bull. He is the more explosive fighter. In his offensive wrestling is very good. I'm very good, especially for a guy from continental, from Western Europe. Good power on the feet. But I don't get this one. I think Hermansson should be the favorite, and I think Hermansson should be the favorite by more than Vettori is the favorite right now. For one, I don't like Vettori stepping into this fight on this short a notice. Full camp, I might feel differently about it. I know Vettori was going to be fighting soon anyway, but just having to jump into that weight cut earlier cannot help him. And Hermansson is he's one of the smarter fighters in the division. He's lost fights in the UFC. Hermansson has lost fights. And when he's lost, it's tended to be pretty spectacular. Cannonier and Santos just both blew him out of his sneakers with punches. Cesar Ferreira finished him with a submission on the ground. And those are all, Ferreira, Santos, and Cannonier are 3 of the more physically powerful and explosive middleweights in recent UFC middleweight history. Hermansson, otherwise, really, really does fight to his best advantage and makes the most of pretty modest physical tools. He's not a fast guy. He's not an explosive guy. He's pretty strong. He's not a weakling, but he's not Jacare. He's not Yoel Romero. Yet, he's continually just outsmarted and outfought just physically superior fighters. I liked the Gastelum fight. Just as short and quick as it was, it surprised me because it was a position, and I think I said this when we did the recap afterwards, that's a position where probably everybody in the building was like, okay, I've seen this before. The guy's on the ground. He's kind of holding on to the other guy's ankle. Just let him go, get back up so we can get back to kickboxing and finish this fight. And Gastelum was the last guy in the room to realize that, no, Hermansson meant business. And it cost him, a fight he could not afford to lose. I like Hermansson in this one. I'm going to take Hermansson by decision. I think Vettori will definitely have him in trouble in spots early on. Might even have him in trouble on the ground. Vettori has a good wrestler, like I said, heavy top game. I don't think Hermansson will necessarily finish him, but give me Hermansson by decision, unanimous decision, and a pretty straightforward one at that. Am I out of my mind, Keith Shillan?
No, absolutely. I mean, out of your mind. I don't think taking either guy in this matchup is out of your mind. I mean, even though Hermansson is an underdog, it's it's close to a pick'em fight. So, I wasn't sure who you're going to pick because you've been pretty high on Vettori on the recap shows. Mm-hmm. So I thought you might go that way. So I am intrigued by this matchup. And I know I just said that, but I think I've said that about the last three fights, which is I think this is good matchmaking in this card, and this is as good as a matchup they can make on such short notice. And I'm more intrigued by this matchup, as I said in the opening of the show, than I was at the Kevin Holland fight, just from a stylistic X and O's, and also from the guy who kind of I felt like deserves the main event, the higher ranked opponent of the two young fighters in Vettori and Holland. So I'll start with Hermansson. You're absolutely right. This guy does not get credit for one. He's got some just really good wins on his record. You mentioned it. He's not a great athlete, but he makes up with his IQ, his technique, and his output. He's got really high output. He just never stops working. He has an in and out, coming in and out of the pocket style on the feet. He keeps his hands tight, not in the flexing sense, but I mean like in a high guard, good boxing, close to his chin. He conserves a lot of energy because he just touches. He doesn't lay into every blow, though he does lack KO power from what we've seen. Could be an issue. A lot of kicks, kind of everywhere. Calf kicks. He'll throw in the occasional oblique kick. Defensively, he is a little awkward, and he kind of dips a lot to his right, which could leave him open to left side attacks. We haven't seen that yet, but he hasn't really faced a good southpaw like Vettori is. So that could be a problem for Hermansson that I'm a little worried about. Also, Jacare showed, even though Jacare, I don't think the fight was as close as the broadcast made it seem like. Jacare had one good round, but that one good round, he was ripping Hermansson to the body. So that could be something that Vettori looks for. He also had a lot of success when he made Hermansson fight off his back foot, though I was impressed that by his chin, because Hermansson has been tagged, and other than the Cannonair fight, hasn't been hurt. Now, this guy is an absolute wizard. I don't want to say he's underrated on the ground because I feel like lately he's been getting his respect. But this is a guy that submitted David Branch a good black belt. He out-grappled Renato Jacare Souza. Now, Jacare was past, close. I'd say past his prime. Like, definitely decline when he faced Hermansson. But to almost submit Jacare, I don't care when he is. I don't care if he's 100. That's still a great accomplishment. His Topuria, I talked about Topuria with that wraparound guillotine. That's something Hermansson does. I also like that Hermansson has good top control. He's not just a guy who fights for submission. He's really, really good on the ground, and he's also fun to watch on the ground. Like even in the, he rolled for the leg lock against Gastelum, as you pointed out, and then got the submission. Gastelum's a good grappler. So I like that Hermansson. Let's move over to Vettori. I like Vettori. I think he deserves this matchup, but I want to say something that's been bothering me when I've heard people talk about Vettori. I really think people overrate his fight against Adesanya. One, that's not the Israel Adesanya that is today, but also, yeah, he won Adesanya won a split decision. That should not have been a split decision. Adesanya clearly won that fight. It wasn't that close. On a positive thing, the thing that I took out from the fight, even though I thought he lost pretty convincingly, is that he didn't get frustrated when Adesanya started clowning on him like he does on so many people. He stuck to a game plan. It wasn't working, but he didn't seem frustrated. And that was when he was 24. So he showed some mental IQ, mental toughness in that fight. He's an absolutely physically imposing guy. When you look at him, he looks like he could easily fight at light heavyweight. He's aggressive. He's basically a bruiser. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. Like I don't mean by brawler. I mean he's more of a bullying type. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a compliment. He has very short, hard hooks, solid head movement. You mentioned Marvin Eastman on this broadcast. We're gonna bring it up a second time. He does shoulder rolls, which Marvin Eastman would absolutely love. A nice slip and dip style. Also keeps himself. I was talking about Movsar Evloev about not only does it's not only avoiding the strike, but also keeping yourself in position to land. Vettori does that well. Like he'll slip and also come back. He can drop his hands though. And I think that's because of the output. It's just kind of natural to do when you have such a high output. And he can be a little left-hand happy, which might not be a problem in the Hermansson fight. The one thing that surprises me most about him is for a guy that is so physically imposing, when you look at him, he doesn't have a lot of pop in his, or he doesn't. He has hurting power, not separating you from consciousness power. Now he's still young, still developing, still improving, so that could I wouldn't be surprised if he lands a big shot. Good body kicks, not a bad grappler himself. Good entries. Solid top control, is a submission threat. He's never gone 25 minutes, as you mentioned, and getting a fight that he was training for 15 minutes, and also a bigger guy to making the shorter camp, shorter time to make it is definitely concerning. So as a prediction, this is a step up in competition for Vettori, regardless of how. I know you've said very highly things of him. He's grown on me too. Like I don't know if I was as high as you were when we were doing the recapping him, but he's definitely grown on me. But Jack Hermansson is not Carl Roberson. Like this is the big step up in competition. So I am also going to take Hermansson. I really see Vettori only having a puncher's chance. I think it's a good puncher's chance. And a good puncher and a power's chance, but also like an output, just if he can survive. It's weird. Vettori's style could be, even though it's I'm worried about him going 25 minutes. His style and his output could actually build for 25 minutes. Like he actually might be one of these guys. It wouldn't surprise me if he's one of these guys is surprisingly very strong in the fourth or fifth round because of his building style. That said, I like Hermansson. I like his takedowns. I think he gets a few takedowns. And honestly, his submission game is so good right now. If he can almost catch Jacare, I think he can catch Vettori. So I'll take him. I'm going to say he gets a submission in the third round.
Excellent. I know you've had a long day today, but do you have time for one bonus question?
Sure.
All right. So we've had a swap of dance partners. These gentlemen's originally scheduled dance partners, Jacare Souza and Kevin Holland, are locking it up next weekend at UFC 256. Buy or sell, Hermansson, Vettori, Jacare, and Holland is the next challenger for the middleweight title one of these four men?
Ooh, that is such a good question. Yeah, I'm going to buy.
Like whichever of the winners is more impressive?
I'm going to buy the winner of this matchup. Because I kind of feel like Hermansson has the win over Jacare, so it's like that is a little step up. They also took Vettori off the Jacare fight, almost kind of showing the hand that they believe this matchup is the bigger matchup. Uriah Hall could still be an option. You hear Robert Whittaker thrown out there, but when Adesanya beat Robert Whittaker already, to me, if someone gets a quick finish, yes, I still think you could probably sell Uriah Hall. It doesn't help when Dana White's on the post-fight press conference. I think just knocked out a legend and completely doing the opposite of selling the guy, talking about calling him like one of the most boring fighters in history. I don't know. It's weird. It's such a weird, like, Adesanya has, 2 title defenses and kind of already cleaned up the division. As crazy as that is.
It is a strange time for this division. Give it a couple more years, and I think there's a whole crop of contenders that are going to be there. I mean, well, look at Holland that we're talking about right now.
Well, yeah, we might not even have to say a couple years. We could be saying a couple weeks. If Vettori wins and Holland wins, those are 2 young guys that just like a month ago was not getting talked about as like a title challenger in the next fight.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Imagine being Vettori and going from Carl Robertson 2 fights later, you're fighting for the title. Or think about when Kevin Holland, I don't remember who did he beat when he Adesanya was in the crowd and he started calling out Adesanya and we're like, dude, relax, you just beat Phil in like low level.
Was it like the Darren Stewart fight or something like that?
It was his last fight.
Oh, then it was Charlie Ontiveros. Like,
yeah.
If he really called out Adesanya.
Remember Adesanya was in the crowd, and then afterwards he talked about, he said, oh, yeah, we had words at a hotel he knows he didn't really go.
You're right.
I'm pretty sure that was his last. Imagine going from Charlie, I don't even how to say his name, to the championship title in 2 fights. That'd be insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. All right. You heard it here. That is the preview and prediction show for UFC on ESPN 19, Hermansson versus Vettori. Just a quick recap of all the picks. And these may be out of order as the UFC has been shuffling things this week. But Luis Smolka versus Jose Quinonez. Keith has Quinonez by decision. Ben has Smolka by decision. Gabriel Benitez versus Justin Jaynes. Both of us have Benitez by decision. Ilia Topuria versus Damon Jackson. Both of us have Topuria by decision. Jimmy Flick versus Cody Durden. Both of us have Flick by submission. Matt Wiman versus Jordan Leavitt. Keith has Leavitt by first round submission. Ben has Leavitt by decision. John Villante versus Jake Collier. Keith has Villante by first round knockout. Ben has Villante by second round knockout. Nate Landwehr versus Movsar Evloev. Both of us have Evloev by decision. Roman Dolidze versus John Allan. Ben has Dolidze by first round knockout. Keith, Dolidze by second round knockout. In the women's flyweight matchup between Montana De La Rosa and Taila Santos, we have some dissension. Ben has Santos by decision. Keith has De La Rosa by decision. The co-main event, Ovince St. Preux versus Jamahal Hill. Keith has Hill by decision. Ben has OSB by first round finish, probably a submission. And in the headliner, Jack Hermansson versus Marvin Vettori. Both of us have Hermansson. Ben by decision, Keith by third round submission. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the fights.